What's up guys, I'm Rich from Spray Black Studios, and today I'm going to go through my top 5 gift ideas for the miniature painter in your life. For years, my girlfriend and my family have told me that I'm an absolute nightmare to buy presents for. Like many miniature painters, this is my main hobby, and also like many other miniature painters, if I want something, I tend to go out and buy it. This does, however, mean that I'm pretty difficult to buy presents for, and to be honest, I struggle to come up with a list often of stuff that I actually want. So today I've thrown together a list of my top 5 things that I recommend you have a look at if looking to buy a present for a miniature painter in your life, or if producing a list for your family or friends of things you might want. So my first option is a decent brush set. Whilst high-end expensive brushes aren't going to make you paint like Andy Wardle or Darren Latham, a decent quality brush can make a big difference to your painting, and to be honest, a good quality brush, when looked after the right way, will last you for years. When looking at brushes, you have two main choices, sable or synthetic. Generally, sable brushes, as natural fibres, tend to be softer and tend to hold a point very well, where the synthetic ones tend to have a little bit more of a spring in them, which actually can often be a little bit better for doing detail work. Synthetic brushes also offer an option if you're ethically against using animal products in the brushes, and to be honest, the quality of synthetic brushes is catching up all the time. Now, whether you want a sable or a synthetic brush, there are plenty of options available. Companies like Raphael, Winsor & Newton, Artis Opus do very nice brushes that are used all across the world by professional painters and amateurs alike. My current favourite brushes to use, however, are my set of Broken Toad Mark IIIs. Broken Toad are a company based here in the UK that produce both sable and synthetic brushes of a very high quality. In my time using these Mark IIIs, I found that they are able to keep a point incredibly well, and much like me during lockdown, they have a nice big belly so that they can contain quite a lot of paint, which means longer working times and less trips to the palette. Now, these brushes aren't suddenly going to make you a much better painter. They're not going to make you paint like a pro, and they're not going to teach you techniques that you didn't know before. But when I made the transition from a cheaper synthetic brush to a more expensive, higher quality brush, I did notice a difference in my brush control. Things like my edge highlighting improved because I was using a brush that could hold a point for longer, and also I could use larger brushes to do the work on the smaller details, which also meant that it made it easier for me to blend and for me to glaze as well. So whether you go for the sable Mark III brushes or the cheaper but still very awesome Fugazi range, you can't go wrong, and your miniatures will thank you. Now, to go nicely with the high quality brushes, for me, a wet palette is a must. Again, whilst adding a wet palette to your setup isn't going to suddenly make you into a pro painter, it can certainly help. Wet palettes work by having a hydration pad underneath a sheet of parchment paper, kind of like having a moisture reservoir. This then prevents your paint from drying out quite so quickly as it would if you were to use a bathroom tile or a hard palette like most people do. A good wet palette will ensure that your paint stays at the perfect consistency for longer, lasts longer, and thus saves you money, and it also helps with blending. Now, like with brushes, there are many options available. If you want to start on the cheaper side of it as an introduction, you have the Army Painter palette, which is probably the most readily available. Many local hobby stores will stock this and comes in at a pretty reasonable price. Whilst it's not the best on the market, as a great introduction, can't go wrong. Probably regarded as the best option on the market, you have the Masterson's Stay Wet palette. Now, this one, for quality of build and for the design of it itself, you really can't get a great deal better, but they are expensive, coming in at almost 3 times what the Army Painter palette costs you, and to be honest, it is designed more for the art world, so you need to go through art suppliers rather than just your local hobby shop to try and find one. My current favourite palette, however, is the Redgrass Games one, which is, again, fairly easily available through quite a lot of hobby stores, but whilst it is more expensive than the Army Painter one, doesn't quite hit the price of that Masterson's. It's a very well built palette with the hydration pads and the parchment paper again quite easily available. I've had this palette for a couple of years now and it's still working just as well as it did when I first got it. Much like the higher end brushes, when I purchased this item it didn't suddenly make me start painting like a pro, but with having longer working times on the paint it meant I got more consistent edge highlighting, and to be honest it's probably already paid for itself with the amount that I've saved on buying paint. So having got yourself some nice brushes to help with that brush control when painting your minis, it's time to get something to help you keep that miniature nice and still. A painting handle can help with stability of the model whilst you're painting, preventing any greasy finger marks or anything like that from getting onto the miniature whilst you're painting it. And it also can make certain areas easier to reach to prevent any silly hand acrobatics you may have to do. My personal choice for a painting handle at the moment is actually one of the older model Citadel ones. With a nice chunky form factor, I find that it fits quite nicely in my hand, is nice and stable, and it's got actually a decent balance to it. Citadel have, however, just updated the design on their new painting handle, and for all the jokes of it looking like a sex toy, a lot of the reviews haven't been quite so good. They've made it much smaller, much sleeker, which, whilst it may look a little bit better, unfortunately means that some people have found it hard to grip, finding it too small, too thin to really get nice stability. So in light of that, my recommendation would be the Get a Grip by Garfi. Now this is a painting handle available directly through his eBay store and is a very simple design comprising of 3D printed parts that fit together around the base of the miniature and is super easy to use. If you purchase one of these painting handles, not only are you getting a good quality product, but you're also supporting an individual who's been very supportive and influential to a lot of people in the hobby community. Now for those of you who know me, you know that I love to take photos of my models. If you've painted something that you're particularly proud of, then why not show it off? And if you've spent hours and hours painting something only to take a quick little mobile phone snap in front of your painting desk with paint strewn everywhere, with tools, with whatever in the background, you're not doing it justice. So, in steps the ever so popular Lightbox. A simple design to not only give you a nice, clear, distraction-free background, but also to give you a nice, even lighting on your miniatures to really show them off at their best. Now, lightboxes aren't an essential item if you want to take photos. There are other techniques that you can do, but I will say that the lightbox I'm using, whilst far from the most expensive on the market, has really improved the quality of my photos and it's also made my life so much easier. There are a lot of options available. A quick scroll through Amazon will give you pages and pages of various different types of lightbox, but I recommend looking at one that's approximately 16" by 16". That'll allow for you to take pictures of the bigger miniatures such as Imperial Knights, as Archaon, and also look for one with multiple coloured backgrounds. Generally, you'll only want to use the white or the black backgrounds, but you'd be surprised at when the other ones can come in handy. The Neue lightbox that I'm currently using is now unfortunately unavailable, otherwise I would link it down in the description below because it is by far the best that I have ever used. But a quick search through Amazon will give you plenty of options and I'm sure you can find one that'll fit the bill. So whilst not strictly a mini painting item, a good set of quality hobby tools for me is an absolute essential, and for anybody in the hobby is something that you are going to need. This is another area where a set of cheap tools would do the job, but spending a little bit more just to go up slightly in quality will make a big difference to you, especially if you're a regular converter or kit basher. Now there are plenty different types of hobby tool available and all of them will have a particular function or particular job that they're going to need to do. But for today's purposes, I've gone for the two most common ones. A good quality pair of side cutters or clippers are essential when removing things from sprues or when chopping things up when doing a conversion. You'll want a pair of clippers that are going to be well built and that are going to be strong, particularly when dealing with pewter or resin miniatures that can quite easily damage your tools. You'll also ideally want a pair of cutters that are going to be nice and comfortable to use. Now, I highly rate the Citadel side cutters for their quality of build and for their form factor. I generally find they are quite comfortable, although when doing a lot of conversion work or trying to work on anything particularly hard, as mentioned, like a pewter mini, as the fact they have no soft coating around the outside of the grips, they can dig into your hand a little bit and aren't the most comfortable when doing jobs like that. For removing things off the sprue, due to the size of them, you're able to get in nice and tight to items that are close in together, which just means less damage and less things you have to fix. If you're regularly cutting things that are particularly tough, then it's worth looking at something like these electrical wire cutters that have this nice rubberized grip around the outside, which just makes them a little bit more comfortable and a little bit softer on your hands. Craft knives are the other pretty essential tool. Whilst, again, you can go for a cheaper one, a couple of pounds will get you a simple plastic handled knife, but spending a little bit more, going for the £8 to £10 mark, can get you a good quality handle with changeable blades. This blade will also likely be more comfortable for you to use and thus safer, and will last you for a lot longer. X-Acto are probably the market leaders at the moment for craft knives. They're available through many hobby stores and quite easily available online. To be honest, for any of the models in their range, you can't really go wrong. So there we are, there's my 5 recommendations for things for you to look at as potential presents for any miniature painters in your life. Whilst in mini painting, like many other things, personal preference does make a big difference and does play a big part, such as in the brushes. I prefer the broken toed ones, there are plenty of others that prefer the Artis Opus or the Raphaels. Hopefully though, this will give you a bit of an idea of things to look at and maybe things to explore. It's always worth trying new products. I have intentionally left miniatures off this list as, due to the absurdly large amount of minis that are on the market, it's very difficult to buy these for people. You'd need to know which army they collect, which game system they collect, and to be honest, if you knew that, you probably wouldn't be watching this video. So thank you for watching this video, guys. I hope you got some value out of it, and please feel free to share this to anyone you think may be struggling to buy presents for a mini painter, or alternatively, if you've got someone that you think might be looking to buy a present for you, might work as a little handy hint. As always, if you don't want to miss my upcoming content, then please hit that big red subscribe button down below. And remember guys, if all else fails, spray it black and start again.